Thank God my dad went to prison. Edit that out. For those of you who don't know, my father is Gary Halbert. Really quickly, I'll tell you, my dad would pull me out of school and say, you can learn what you're about to learn in school tomorrow. But I'm going to take you where like the magic happens. And all of a sudden, I'm flying to meetings with top copywriters and marketers. And he just was, boom, I'm teaching this kid everything. He took me to, I think it was a Sheraton in Santa Monica. It was between like breakfast and lunch. And it was Eric Weinstein, a top list broker, and Jay Abraham. I'm the only kid in the meeting. That's the level of experience I was getting as a young person, and I was really paying attention to it.
How do you go about figuring out what you should spend a lot of time on?
If you really want to be a great copywriter, and not everybody wants to be a great copywriter. Some people want to be good enough, but all the top copywriters have a few things in common. First of all, edit as though your reader has to pee. You are fighting so many things for attention where you didn't have to fight for nearly as hard back in the day. The second thing I want people to do is get a collection of swipe files, whether it's landing pages and anything else. Cut it up. Have a file that is just headlines. Have a file that is just openings, subheads, bullets, closing arguments, postscripts, proof elements, right? Have a file that's just stories. And that way, when you're stuck on that part of the copy, you looking at them from many different industries and areas, that will spark ideas. And when you do it, it will not look like you just ripped everybody off.
That's fantastic.
The other thing that's really, really important that was part of the process that I did that is different, and I haven't seen other people teaching this before, is I do that throughout all of the copy whenever possible. I feel like that it's a subtle difference. It's hidden psychology is what it is,
That's interesting. You're making me take too many notes, Bon. What you've said today might actually be the masterclass for copywriters in 2026. This is fantastic stuff. Okay, so today I'm here with Bon Halbert. Thanks so much for joining me, man.
Absolutely. I know it's been a hard time, getting aligned for our schedules and everything, but I'm glad we finally get to do this.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. The fact that you're one of the top direct response marketing experts and you've been coaching copywriters, instructing copywriters for so long, so many people have said so many great things, and I've, always heard great things about you. So I knew I'd have to find a way to get you on an interview at some point. So I'm glad you're here now, Yeah, thanks. So you've been in the game, 40 years? 40 years of experience in this world of direct response?
47.
Wow.
And okay, so going back, literally, I grew up, I remember stuffing, stamping, sealing, and, addressing envelopes when I was, before I wouldn't even be addressing envelopes, but when I was a little kid, we'd be around the kitchen table or the dining room table. And my dad always did that for test mailing. So, for those of you who don't know, my father is Gary Halbert. And then, really quickly, I'll tell you, and just stop me if I wind on. One day, my dad was terrible with managing his money. He was fantastic at making it, but he was also, I used to always say the only the only thing that eclipsed his ability to make money was to blow it. And one time he didn't have as much money as he normally did, and he turned around and, I was walking with him. I remember exactly where this was in Santa Monica. We were walking to his favorite cafe or, morning place to get coffee and breakfast. And I said, I'm really lucky. He says, why is that? I said, my oldest brother and everything got your, hand-me-down toys and cars and everything. I said, I'm going to be able to see how you make your money. And he just was, boom, I'm teaching this kid everything. And all of a sudden I'm flying to meetings with top copywriters and marketers. And I've spoken with some of them since then. A lot of them still very well connected with. And, I'm the only kid in the meeting. My dad would pull me out of school and say, you can learn what you're about to learn in school tomorrow. And, but I'm going to take you where like the magic happens. And I think on that occasion, he took me to, I think it was a Sheraton in Santa Monica. And I remember it was a restaurant. Everybody had finished, it was between like breakfast and lunch. And it was Eric Weinstein, a top list broker, and Jay Abraham. And Eric would bring these data cards, which was hot audiences. So he was in charge of identifying hot lists that were responsive. And then Jay Abraham would say, okay, this is the offer that you probably want to make him. And my dad would come up with the hooks and the headlines and the stuff like that. So, that's the level of experience I was getting as a young person, and I was really paying attention to it. I wasn't dragged along and sitting in the corner and drawing with crayons or anything. So, and then really another side note is, my dad, if he didn't write the Boron letters, I'd have no proof of that because nobody was going to believe that, when I was 27, that I would have, a decade, 15 years of experience or whatever in direct response marketing.
I can imagine at that young age, it's very, you're very impressionable, right? So a lot of that stuck with you quite quickly compared to many copywriters that learn it later in life where they kind of have to get used to it. Like the same you would learn a foreign language as an adult versus learning a new language as a kid, right? There's a copywriter I coach. He started with me when he was 15. He was struggling 15 to 16, but then he clicked. And I would say he's, in the top 3 copywriters I've ever coached because it's something about maybe the fact that he was a lot younger too, that he's just very open to that sort of information and it really clicked for him,
Oh, it is 100% true. I think in a way that I've never met anybody else do. And it's not, I never say it's talent. It's like, Tiger Woods was hitting, golf balls when he was 4 years old. Right. And you're 100% right because, you can't pick up a language without having an accent like after the age of 13 or something like that. I forget what the number is, but the way you think is completely changed. And, I'm learning to think and being trained how to think and, understand things from, Gary Halbert's perspective at a very, very early age. And then, of course, everything you go from that point forward is kind of, grooved into it. So, all of marketing boils down to, you want something from somebody else, another human being. It's like, okay, what does that person want? So much that they're willing to trade me, trade for me for what I want from them for, if I can provide that for them. But that's not, a lot of marketers and copywriters, they want to become copywriters and their copywriting, starts when they sit down and look at a blank screen or they start sifting through a swipe file or something like that. Not, my copywriting and marketing and all that starts with, as soon as I have an idea of what I want to create, because you're walking around thinking about ideas. So, my father was, excuse me, let me get a little water. My father, his mind was never turned off. And to the point where he couldn't do anything else. Like, he couldn't like maintain his cars, put in oil in the car and stuff like that. But his mind was constantly working. And, it was, people would see him sit down and write an ad in like, half an hour or something like that, like a full page ad, but they didn't understand he's been writing it for weeks in his head.
That's a great insight. I think a lot of copywriters, they look at, especially new ones, right? They look at the words on the page as a reflection of the effort, when in actual fact, that's maybe 20%, 10% of all the stuff that they did beforehand, thinking about it, maybe even all the things that they removed from the page. It's all the stuff that you also cut and there's a lot of other stuff there. I remember like a few months ago, I was writing a new sales letter and my lead was 3 times the length of the lead I actually ended up going with because I was just, in my first draft. And there was a lot of time I spent on that lead. I spent a lot of time on that lead and I removed 2/3 of it. So nobody sees that part of it. It looks like a very short sales letter compared to the original one I wrote because it was a story lead. It looked like it was a very long story I wrote, but I cut it down and, but you don't see that part. Right. So, that's interesting.
There's a time when I was with my brother, my brother and I were actually writing a competing pieces. And I told him, I said, your copy's too long. He's like, I think it's fine. I say, well, let me edit it. And he goes, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll do a 3-way test. And it was my copy, and his copy that I edited. And what happened was my copy and his copy that I edited, which were completely different, right? Beat the unedited copy by 400%. And he asked me, what'd you do? I said, I went
What's
through
your
it
secret?
and acted like, no, I'll tell you what my answer. I said, I went through it and acted like I was the most self-interested, like, jerk in the world, that it was all about me and everything out. And I cut out everything that wouldn't keep me interested in going.
Oh, interesting.
And so I just hacked and hacked and hacked. It's like, because you'll see people, I'll give you traditional stuff like, copywriters will say, so and so graduated from Yale with a degree in this and this and this and that. That comes down to maybe a proof element, to why you're an expert and stuff, but that's not grabbing your attention right off the bat, you know. So it's something that you might even want to completely remove. I have a degree in marketing. I never mention it, except to tell people I never mentioned my degree. Because you have no interest in that. You have an interest in what have I done lately, and what can I teach you, and what can I, what kind of hacks or strategies I can show you and stuff like that. So you have to go through editing that way. And then the one thing that's also changed over the years is editing. You have to do a lot. You have to be a lot harsher on it now than you used to be, because people used to read for entertainment. Instead of iPhones, everybody was, reading newspapers and stuff like that. And if you look at books throughout history, they get the attention spans don't get shorter. People get bored faster. That's what happens. TikTok life, and the Instagram, everything else is making it so we got to say something really quick, get them to, sell the next, keep watching, and then keep them going. But we have to do that you have to be more fierce about that. You can still get people to watch a 2.5 hour Marvel movie, right? But you notice they have 3 big bang endings. When I was a kid, there was one big explosive ending at the end. And so they can get bored a lot quicker. So what you have to do is you need to cut that out. And then I will give credit to my brother who had said that, after I was explaining that, he goes, yeah, edit as though your reader has to pee. So the only thing that stays,
very good.
the only thing that sticks around is, what, or should stay is something that they would be willing to, hold it for just a little bit longer to make sure, to hear that bit of information.
I think that's a good insight though, because I've heard a few people say, that, I mean, I've said this to many copywriters too. I'd say, like, imagine your prospect is either on the train or making breakfast for themselves, or maybe sitting on the loo or something. But that's dead time, I guess you could say. Whereas what you're saying is there's something else that's putting pressure on them to give attention to something else. Like, that's a different way to think about it.
Yeah, it is constantly doing that. And you are fighting so many things for attention where you didn't have to fight for nearly as hard back in the day. Basically, you could get people to and by the way, another thing is people value their reading time more than anything else. So copy, a lot of people think about it as just writing landing pages, but copy is also script writing for VSLs. It's, script writing for video, not just VSLs, but also for posts, and, everything. And anytime that you're using words. And if I sent around and I asked you and I say, hey, Matthew, there's a show you got to check out, but it really gets good about episode 3, right? You'll start watching it till episode 3, right?
Yeah.
And then if I say, hey, check out this song you like, and their average of 3.5 minutes, you'll give it, you'll try the song and everything. If I hand you a 12-page sales letter and I say, hey, give this a read, everybody's like, okay, I'll do this later when I have time, and they put it down. Right. That, you might do it because I've asked you to do it or somebody's done it as a friendship. But that's the other thing that's really, really important. That was part of the process that I did that is different. Copywriters will take their copy, they'll hand it to somebody that they love and trust and everything and say, could you read this and tell me what you think? And they read the whole thing. And the truth is, they, because they're doing it because, your mom's not going to read, tell you, hey, Matthew, this bored me and I would have stopped reading in page 1. Right. So what happens is they go, oh no, it was good. I like this part that you add, and it ebbed and flowed and everything. But in reality, you may have never gotten to the exciting part, because the people who are getting your sales message, they can close that email and move on to another email. They can stop, shut down your YouTube video and go to a different YouTube video. They have no social contract. They're not afraid of, offending you by just turning it off and not finishing reading. So your editing has to be kind of, it has to be very much aware of that fact. And so be very careful with biases in the people that you're getting critiques from before you put something out.
There's no social contract with the prospect. It's
Yeah, I mean,
interesting. It's like they're doing their thing. They don't have to read it. It's a good, yeah. Like whereas, yeah, it makes sense.
and and I think the real problem is just because somebody's like, they fall in love with their own work. That's one problem, right? They're like, this is really
Yeah, I think
great.
so. Yeah.
Because I'm telling this story and it was so emotional for me and all this other stuff. Somebody else might just absolutely not care about it. And then the other part is, yeah, I mean, you don't feel obligated. You even have some friends, let's say, who you're on their email lists and stuff like that. You don't feel obligated to read every single word. Now, if you knew that they were monitoring whether or not you read every word, you might read every word. It's not like being face to face. You and I are face to face. We're having a conversation. You feel obligated to let me finish speaking or to say my piece. If this was an email, as soon as I get bored, click.
Definitely, that makes sense. Well, I think I like reading copy, but it's true. Like, we say, oh, I'll read that later. I think that's often what happens as well, right? It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me check it out later, and then continue my day.
There's another thing that I say. There's two parts about copywriting is or marketing in part. One thing that makes you a good marketer is understanding you. There's a lot of other people like you. I always say I'm not arrogant. I'm just positive everybody else is as screwed up as I am. Okay, and that means if something has got my attention, it's getting someone else's attention as well. Right. I'm not the only one that would be attentive the only one who might be into that. The other part of that, which is kind of like, it seems like the opposite is, not everybody is like you. So copywriters are much more likely to sit and, especially the really good marketers, they love to hear a good pitch. My father would sit there, and if there was a street vendor out in the tourist area and he's got this hustle and this pitch, my dad would listen to the hustle and pitch, and sometimes he would just buy whatever they're selling to thank them, for their time, because he wanted to hear their pitch, and we do like to read copy, and we like to, pay attention to promos and, and think that way. But, your average person might not be, you know what I'm saying? So I think it'd be easier to get you to read a 12-page sales pitch than the average person. I think what I'm saying is I think I would have to do, you were like, wait a minute, let me go through this whole thing. And especially if you found out, if you had information above beforehand that it was a winner, because then you're going to read it and you're going to break it down. You might reread it and stuff like that. But, the prospects, they may not be that into it. You know what I'm saying? So I think you definitely are going to be somebody like me who's more willing to read the sales pitch, than the average person. But but again, the first part that I was saying is if it really gets your attention, it's getting other people's attention too. So this is, and a perfect example of this would be this. If it got your attention, there's a good chance it would get other copywriters' attention. But it might not get, somebody who's tired, came home from a job of nursing's attention. You know what I'm saying? Or hold their attention. That's the point I'm saying. So it's, it's a balance and needing to know that,
How do you go about developing that, let's say, identity or voice or perspective from the prospects, coming from the prospect's perspective to see if I was a prospect, would this catch my attention? Like, how do you start to develop that skill?
Well, so there's systems for doing it, and then there's a natural innate ability to do it. So what happens is, you have to be honest and say, walk in their shoes. So that's the first thing. Okay. So if you walk in their shoes, whatever it is that you're doing, you find out that, and I'll give you an example. First of all, walking in their shoes is super valuable. So that means actually being their buyer, going out and checking the competition, trying the product, playing around with it, and getting into it to a degree where you know it inside and out. And so you find out what's really frustrating. And you're like, how can I solve this problem so it gives me a USP, right? Because you find out there's this problem when you're doing this. So for example, I collect watches, and I was going to buy a used Rolex watch, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to get, hosed on the deal, right? And so
Yeah.
I was talking with this, you know, the person that I had trusted, and I said, you know, what's a good, you know, Submariner, and about what year are they about to, you know, maybe start increasing and becoming more classic? And he says, oh, this one and everything. And I was hemming and hawing. He goes, I'll tell you what, if you buy this watch, right, and you know, you know, come back within a year and you haven't scratched or dinged the whole thing up, I'll buy it for 90% of what you buy, you know, what you paid for it. You right? And that was like, that took away my fear of this having a massive price drop, right? You know, and me
Yeah.
spending too much value on that. Because, but walking in the shoes of the prospect, he knew that he's been there, right? Because he's buying the watches right before he sells them. And so what happens is you start to really understand it because you're feeling it and you're going through the process. So you really don't know what it's like to be lost at sea and worried about whether or not you're going to get back, or stuck on a boat that's not working, until you actually do it. But this is a tip that I'll give you, which is like, when you walk through it with your eyes wide open as a marketer, you come up with some huge advantages. So I was putting out the very first book. It was an updated version of the Boron letter. So it's my dad's letters, but with my commentary added. And so the first thing I did is go buy a book on Amazon, right? I hadn't done that, at the time. So when I did it, I saw this little section that said people who bought this book also bought this book. And I was like, oh, that would be interesting to be in there, right? So what I did is I said, what would I know it's an algorithm, right? Or something that, it's software that's programmed, but somebody made the decisions for that program. So what is it that they would really want? And I was like, well, they wouldn't want to sell a book that was 99 cents because they're trying to increase their average order value, right? They'd want a book that, was well liked. And of course, they would want to make sure that they're tied to people did buy the same books. So I did something that, hardly anybody was doing during the launch of my book. I did all of these things to capture names and addresses. And, I'm not going to give you a whole training on publishing on Amazon. But one of the key secrets to doing that is I told other people when they were buying my book, I said, oh, go also buy John Carlton's book. He just released, right?
Mm,
So he calls me and
that's smart.
he says, hey, how did you get people to send my buyers emails selling your book? And I'm like, I didn't even know they did that, right? So what happened was, so everybody was buying his book would get, hey, people bought this book, also have been buying and loving this other book, that Bond published.
Mm,
And so then what I did was
smart. Yeah.
I tested it 2 more times, and I was like, okay, how can I increase this? And so I wrote an email to our list. It was an unscrubbed list back when the open rates were actually a little bit more accurate than they are nowadays. And the list hadn't been scrubbed since like 1991, right? And it had, thousands of people on the list and everything. And it got a 52% open rate. It still beat all of my dad's open rate records and stuff like that. And but I wrote, and you guys can adapt this for your emails. So what happened was I wanted to tie it to 2 of the most classic books of all time, the Scientific Advertising and the Robert Collier Letter book. And so I wrote, the subject line was the Holy Trinity of copywriting books, right? And so that curiosity made everybody have to go check it out. All 3 of those books shot up into the direct response marketing category, right to the top. And when for a long, long time, if you went and bought direct, scientific advertising, it also said people bought this, also bought the Boron letters. And then I did it a third time. And when I did it a third time, I said, I want to get people's, email addresses, but I also want their snail mail addresses. So what I did was I went and I said, if I'm going to get I'm going to go, I don't know if you have them where you are, but realtors used to always leave these little notepads that you could use as a shopping list, on your doorstep. So I called one of the places that printed them. I said, can you do this with my editing checklist on every page? And they said, yeah. So I ordered that, and then a batch of those. And then I told people, go sign up, be on my email address, and then I'll give you instructions and you'll show proof that you bought my book. And then I'll send you this notepad. I can't, logistically, there was a problem with the because of the company that was sending them out. So I'm not doing it at the moment, but I mean, I did this for a long time and it worked like a charm. But what I did was the very first email I'd send them was like, by the way, guess what other books that, people are always asking me what other books I recommend. So I would list these books. So if, Matthew put out his list of top 10 copywriting books, but Bond's not on it, what would happen is when they went to go buy some of those books, they'd see my book. Right.
Smart.
And so
Yeah.
what happened is, but here's the real, it's like, yes, okay, that it's clever. It's kind of a smart thing to do. But here's the important part. I was aware, I had my marketing hat on, well, like I said, I don't turn it off. I was, I walked through the shoes of my prospect. I didn't just notice what their frustrations were. I saw opportunities, right? I saw other things that they're doing. So like, if you were doing research properly, you find other opportunities. So, you turn around, like if you're into, people who buy tactical watches, like the military style watches, they collect knives and tactical flashlights. That's another, source of places that you could do JVs for your stuff, right?
Yeah.
You see opportunities in walking in the shoes of your prospects. You see these, stuff like that. Now, I know that doesn't go back to the emotions. So going back to that. If you walk in the shoes of your prospects, so there's a couple of the tried and true techniques. Work the customer service lines. Talk to actual customers. There's nothing like talking to real customers. And when you do talk to real customers, you want to kind of talk to them. Everybody's like doing a survey, right? And that's fine and all, as my dad would say, that's all well and good. But the truth is, the best thing you could do is actually go spend some time with these people and say, hey, let me buy you a drink, and then sit there, chit chat, and ask them very open-ended questions. Hey, what do you think about the new, this? And they start giving you gold because they're just relaxed and you're having a conversation, and they give you the real stuff. And every lemon can be turned into lemonade. Okay. That's one of the things that marketers, good direct response marketers will understand. And, I'll give you another example if you don't mind. David Garfinkel was writing a book. And this is back in the day when everybody was like, hey, you write a book for authority, self-publish it, and, and so that you don't have to spend a year hemming and hawing and perfecting a book. What you do is you ask, you write down some questions, and you have somebody ask you those questions. You record the answers, you have them transcribed, have it edited and cleaned up, and then boom, you got a book, right? Now, yeah, so they were doing that a lot. And so it ends up coming out a little bit less polished than if somebody who was sitting there working and fixing their book. So he asked me to write the foreword for his book, and I read the book, and I could tell that this was like the process that was going on. And I didn't want him to get any complaints about, this is supposed to be a polished copywriter, and this doesn't, this isn't, he's super smooth and everything. So what I did is I said in the foreword, I said, listen, how, when you talk to somebody and they're giving a speech or they're writing something, they have to cross all their T's, dot all their I's. They take forever to make a point. Yet if you sit down at a bar and you have a conversation with somebody, they get right to the point and give you all the good stuff. That's what makes this book so great. It's just like that. It's a conversation that, gets right to the heart of it all. And absolutely no complaints. Right. Another trick that, that I do, or I wouldn't call it a trick, but a tactic and a status, is when you're publishing books, a whole bunch of people, they're publishing a book, which is really a disguised sales pitch. Right. And, you see that in the comments. The first group of comments is all their friends and buddies saying, this is just insanely great value. Matthew always delivers, and blah, 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 blah. Right. And then you get to the newest comments. It's like, man, this is just a sales pitch. More of the ego on this guy, blah, blah. It's a total switch.
Yeah.
Well, here's the deal. People would put their pitches throughout the book. They started putting them at the end of the book, which a lot of people don't get to, right? A lot of people don't finish the whole book, right? And then they would put it throughout. And the whole thing was like, a pitch like every, in every story and everything else. What I did was I was like, put the pitch first and say, look, I'm going to pitch you this and this and that and get it over with. If you like what's in this book, you'll also like this, go do this and this and this and that, and give them the call to action and everything, and give them the call to action in the description. of your book, right? Hey, if you buy this and then go join on this list and do this, and here's the reasons to get onto my, give me a primary email address, etc. And then what would happen is then you just go into value. So the last thing they remember is not that you pitch. They're like, okay, yeah, this was great. This was great. So when I did the Boron letters, at the top of every single chapter, because it's an ebook and in a physical book, I wrote, for more great free letters, visit thegaryhalbertletter.com. Right? Boom, it's over. The rest is just just the letter. So, and then there's letter, and then there's my commentary. So the pitch is super short, super sweet. It's being repeated at the top of each chapter, but nobody's ever complained that this book is nothing but a sales pitch for something else, even though it's actually had a call to action at the top of every chapter.
That's really good. Yeah.
Because the way I'm thinking it is, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. So sure, other people don't like this. Let me do this, and in trying something different. And another thing that's, so talk with your client, with your customers, spend time with them, get them to open up, ask open-ended questions. People are always like, trying to do a poll and, stuff like that on Facebook and certain groups and everything. And everybody realizes it's very public and things like that. You want them in person, relaxed is a great way to do it. Walking in your shoes, I still think that's my favorite version of it. But you have to have a good gut. You have to say, that's what makes you a really good marketer, is having a good gut and saying, hey, well, this was really annoying, and nobody's talking about it. Turn that lemon into lemonade, or be upfront about it and say, look, this part of the process sucks, but it sucks in all of them. There's nobody who, you can't get over this part of the process that sucks. But here we make it as palatable as possible, and most of the time you try and become a problem solver and make it happen. And so that you can fix that. And then again, that becomes your USP. That becomes your unique selling proposition and what sets you apart from everybody else, because you took away the part that sucks. And so I'll give you an example. When it comes to trainings and stuff, one of the things that I tried to do is, everybody I saw teaching people how to write bullets or something like that, what they would do is they would tell you what goes into a good bullet or headline. Everybody learns headlines. So it's curiosity, benefit, and then there's some other key elements you can put in there. But they leave you driving around in your car trying to think of a good headline. Maybe my dad would have you looking at other ads, and stuff like that. And, to inspire you to give ideas. I'm like, no, let's put this into like a system that's not a template, right? But a system that allows you to figure out exactly how to start writing headlines immediately. So every single training I do that I try to do, I want you to be able to do what I just taught you to do as soon as I'm done speaking, because I found that frustrating. I found that waiting for the inspiration, to be frustrating. So I feel like, how can I do this in a way that, it takes all the principles, but puts it into something that is a lot easier, that you can take action on right away. And, it's just, what frustrates you frustrates other people. So walk in those shoes, meet with those people, and the other thing that I'll give you as a tip is, somebody says, hey, this part's a little unclear. And like, no, reread it again. It is clear. No, as soon as they say it's unclear, rewrite it.
Keep reading.
Yeah,
it's coming soon.
Yeah, you'll understand that sentence that made you go, what? It took your brain out of it. But it's just, it's, it's hard to do. Marketing's kind of like jaded optimism. You have to be optimistic to say that you're going to try stuff and it might work, but, jaded enough to say, well, not everything I'm going to do is going to work, and I find that frustrating with a lot of, people are going to find that frustrating with their clients, in the copywriting industry. What happens is, the longest client, copywriting relationships, maybe like 5 years. I mean, that would be an epically long time. Because the clients don't understand is it's a series of tests, really, and then they're not all going to win. So as soon as, they hire you, you get a win. Then they want to hire you again and you get another win. they're monopolizing all your time. And then all of a sudden something doesn't work. And maybe it was their offer didn't match their market. Maybe, it was, whatever. Could be bad timing, could be whatever there's so many issues. And they go, well, now I'm going to go in a different direction. Right. So the copywriter who's delivered almost several wins over and over again, is treated like a movie star who just had a bad movie, their movie bombed and everything. And, then all of a sudden, they don't understand it's a series of tests. And if you want to runaway winner, and I'll ask you this question, I've never had a different answer. The biggest win you had in your marketing career, was it a surprise or not?
No, I would say.
Wow, you're the first one. Everybody
Really?
says it was a surprise that, they didn't know it was going to be as big as it turned out to be.
Well, yeah, I suppose, I don't know. It just felt like the right offer for that market. I just kind of,
Oh, no.
I just thought
I'm
like,
not saying, did you think it would work or not? I'm not saying that.
oh, you mean like it was going to be the control kind of level of
yeah, were you
performance?
shocked at how well it did?
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah, definitely.
okay, so you still
Yeah.
yes. Because
Because I
most
thought
of
it
the
would do
time-
well. Like I thought it would do way better than usual, but I didn't know it would go like exponentially well.
Yeah,
I didn't expect
so,
it to explode. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's things like me getting the Amazon to send emails out to my to other people's buyers and stuff was like, well, I didn't know that was even going to happen, right? You're just trying something new, and that's one of the problems with, in my opinion, with AI. And I don't think there's a problem with AI. I think it's a fantastic tool. I'm supportive of AI. AI is a large language model, but in short, it has got to be based on it can't say unique things. It can say the same things in a unique way, right?
Hmm.
And so if you have a unique thought pattern, if you say something that's different than the way everybody else is thinking, and you put in those talking points into AI, you will get better results out of AI than if you ask it, just write me a landing page based on a copywriting mentorship program, right? If you feed it stuff that says, that's different because of this reason and that reason that nobody else is saying, then you get something that's truly different. And so what I'm teaching my son to do is, everybody's got a different process. Mine is think of talking points. And I usually do it while walking or in motion, driving, whatever. And then I'll take out my phone and I'll make talking points with my notes, and I'll just keep doing that. And then if I want to use AI, I can just go and say, make this based on in making all of these points. And if you throw in a ton of points, and then what you do is you have to edit AI to sound human first, right? And then you have to edit AI to punch up the copy. So, you just say, this made my stomach queasy, or my stomach felt a little queasy. And you turn that into, it felt like there was 14 razor blades crisscross, or, cats with, ice skating on the inside of my stomach. You make it visceral, and you punch up the copy. But once the time it takes to come up with the talking points and the editing and the punch, to make it human and punching up, is better than takes more time than you just writing it yourself, then you're going to write better than AI. At that point, you're going to beat AI. And but in the meantime, to get the most out of AI, you are going to just need to feed it really good, unique talking points. And it's a way of thinking. An example I used the other day, I was talking with somebody, is I was with John Carlton. You know who that old guy is, right? But I was talking to him, it was many years ago, and he was giving me kind of grief about buying an expensive watch. He goes, why would you spend so much money on a watch? A G-Shock keeps more accurate time. And that's accurate, by the way. It's true. And I said, and it was my favorite off the cuff, just line of I said, because wearing an expensive watch reminds me that time is my most valuable asset.
Nice.
He was like, and he was like, that's really good. And here's another really good tip for copy, in my opinion. His reaction means that would actually be kind of a good tagline for a watch ad. The reason for that is conversations. When you have conversations with people and they have a real serious honest to God belly laugh or great reaction or, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. And it's not just, paying lip service. It's not just being kind to you. Mark that down and write it. My son is preparing his first marketing speech for an event that we're going to be doing. And we were over at my mom's and he was talking about like his intro and stuff. And he said something that made my mom really, bust out laughing about it. I go, you need to write that down. You need to make that part of your speech. Great copy can come from great conversations, especially if they're with prospects. Okay. So, when we were talking earlier, I think it was off camera, when my dad wrote the Boron letters, he started, I was 15 at the time. I turned 16 in the middle of the letters. But he had already been teaching me direct response marketing. But this was proof that he wasn't just, he was actually actively teaching me and instructing me. Right. And so I was talking to a friend and I said, and when I was younger, I was 30 and I couldn't tell people that I know about direct response marketing for 20 years. Nobody'd believe me if it wasn't for the Boron letters. And I said, thank God my dad went to prison. He started laughing. Right. And so boom, that became a subject line. Right. Who couldn't open the subject line? Who couldn't open that email that said that? So, great conversations can turn into great copy as well. You just have to, again, the gut, paying attention to other people's reactions and saying, that was a good thing. My dad would have conversations with people about the offers he was making to see what kind of, he would gauge what level of interest they had by looking at their facial expressions, seeing what response. He would say something and see if you asked him for more information. He was talking.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. So he was talking in clickbait headlines and he would see if we would get it. Now, my brother knew this. And so he was torturing my dad and he just refused to ask any follow-up questions. Whereas, I would, I would ask sometimes and other times I would be like, okay, just, wait. But it was, when he, in his process was very unique. And the reason I say that is I've never seen anybody else who sits down and writes the entire copy, but by hand on a legal size pad of paper. Manila legal pad is what he used, and then write it. And then he had very little changes in his edits. He would sit there and write the whole thing through. Now, I know the reason why this is because he came back from the days where they didn't have word processors. Things had to be typed out. So you kind of wanted to be, even when you had a typist doing this, making changes was not a simple and easy thing to do. So he would gather all the information, think about all his talking points, and he would perfect a sales conversation in his head and then commit it to paper in one sitting. Right.
Wow.
And, so he would do that process. Everybody else, everybody's process is different. Some people start with bullets. Some people start with headlines. I myself come up with talking points. I come back, I commit it down onto the laptop. And then I go and I do, now that that's out of my system, and it makes room in my brain for more ideas, more selling points, more talking points, more sales arguments, things to add to the offer. And then I'll come back and add those in. And then I actually am writing it down as the copy flow and then, editing it. So, everybody's process is completely, for the most part, I think most people's processes are completely different. But it all starts with research. It all ends with editing, it's, the better you are at it, the more of a unique kind of thinker you are.
Well, there's a lot of things that you've covered there. I think that the one thing I particularly no, that's good. I liked it a lot. I was very engaged with that. You didn't lose me. You didn't lose me.
Okay.
But what I thought was really interesting is I've seen Amazon suggest me the Boron letters. It's like other people bought this book. That's actually how I first heard of the book, is the fact that Amazon was suggesting it. So I thought it was so funny to hear that story from you, that you intentionally created it that way, with the marketing. That's really good. And another thing that really resonated with me is that you talk about headlines being benefit and curiosity. I like that because a lot of what I've always done with my system for editing, because sometimes I might just write the headline with just pure benefit or just the curiosity, but I'll always make sure that, those two elements are there. And so I always, when I'm editing it, I'll say, okay, there's definitely the core thing that the market cares about. That's in the headline. Can I add the curiosity, or vice versa? And then obviously I want to try and add, for me, I usually like to try and add some element of drama, or like some core dominant emotion that's relevant to the market where it currently is. So like, FOMO, if it's an opportunity, the market's in a state of opportunity and it's good, or maybe a bit more fear if it's, the market's a little bit more concerned at the moment about the state of things, So that's typically how I look at writing my core headlines, but it's also very systematic. So I like that we have a very, it's quite, it's good for me because I've been using that process, and to hear that that's very similar to the way that you've done, it's actually really, that's really great for me. I'm going to double down on that process.
You said something that it's a very great sign as a copywriter, which is you understand that different offers need different things. So, right. Okay. So for example, risk reversal, right? That's a very important thing depending on how much the buying decision, affects how much information somebody needs to make that buying decision. How much is surety? Sorry, is a better way to say it. And that can be based on their level of experience with that kind of product. And it could also be based on how much that represents from their income, right? So, for example, if I say, try this, it's $1, do I need to say, or your money back? No, right? I don't need to give you any risk reversal on that. And the example I like to use for this all the time is houses. There are people, if you're going to buy your first house, it's your biggest purchase ever, usually. The amount of information you want a binder of information. You want inspection reports. You want to know what the comparables are. You want information you can take back to the people you most trust, right? And say, hey, does this look like a good deal? What do you think? Have you heard of this person? This realtor, you want to check reviews. You're doing all this other stuff. In my neighborhood, they are tearing down houses and putting up new, 2-story houses and like McMansions. And so what they'll do is they'll come by and the guy's making $1.5 million decision based on the answer to 2 questions. What's the square footage of the lot? And is there asbestos in your attic? Because if there is, then we have to water it down as we tear the house down. And they're making $1.5 million decision based on like 1 minute's worth of information, right? That's all they need because they're doing it all the time. They've got a lot of money and all of this other stuff. So the amount of risk reversal and the amount of information you have to provide for that person is different, right? So you have to know your audience because each of these different elements. So I sometimes, the things that I might put in a headline might be even risk reversal if I know that this is something for which, I'll say that, and this is guaranteed, or, and if you try this for, in such and such time, or you take these X number of steps and you don't like it, you get your money back or whatever. But that's only if that's something that is prevalent in their mind, really at the beginning of even talking about the discussion. But, you punch up headlines with, I think the things that I've consider putting into a headline is like 13 things. There's numbers, right? Specific numbers are really good because they offer a lot of authority. So if I say that, I have a pet
not
peeve
curiosity.
about this.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I have a pet peeve about things like 6 figures, right? Because one, in my mind, I'm like 6 figures is that? Yeah, oh wait, because it sounds like when I grew up, it was 6 zeros meant $1 million, right? But 6 figures means like $100,000 or whatever. And if I say this book made 6 figures, or I say, in the Boron letters, I made 6 figures, or if I say in the Boron letters, I made $400,000, right, in commissions, or if I turn around and say, I made $413,000, or I say, I made $413,726.48 as of this morning, which sounds the most real to you?
Final one.
That very, very specific one. That's the one that makes you go, okay, yeah, no, he can't be, he's going to have proof to come up with that. So you see these marketers that, they turn around, and I would rather go with that and run that and say, as of this writing, and not change the number for, it's not like I'm going to update that number every time I say it, right? I can just leave that specific number and it will, it helps out. And so, that's one of the things to put in there. A very great formula, for when you're just in a stuck is somebody who's a recognizable expert or a trusted person. That's why they used to use celebrities, because it's like you trust him because he's William Shatner, right? But there's no real reason to trust William Shatner. He's an actor, but you're like,
Yeah.
well, he wouldn't put his reputation on the line if it wasn't for this. That's the thinking. So, it's trusted authority is doing something to provide XYZ benefit to calling out the exact prospect. So, I wouldn't even really say Bon Halbert. Maybe I would even go with, son of the greatest copywriter who ever lived, is sharing or is revealing his system to his system for getting clients to copywriters who want to go full time. Okay, so I'm calling out the specific group of people, right? Not people who are already full-time copywriters, and I'm not calling, I'm going for a very specific group of people. I'm calling them out. But one of the keys in that thing that I teach as well, and I haven't seen other people teaching this before, is the use is revealing, is doing, is something, is because it's an ing, it's present progressive. It's not something that's going on. So if you say, Matthew has had wrote some of the biggest winners, right? Or Matthew has taught, is taught a dozen students, or 100 students or whatever. The difference in saying Matthew is teaching is teaching 100 students, Matthew is writing the best sales copy, sales crushing copy in 2006. And by the way, those numbers can be any number. They can be a date, they can be a weight, they can be any kind of numbers in preview headlines. He's taught 13 copyright. He's teaching 13 copywriters how to, how to crush it in 2026. But anyway, but my point is using that present progressive. I do that throughout all of the copy whenever possible, because it's
you
not
like
something.
that present progressive a lot.
Yeah. So if it's not happening, it's happening now. And that gives you this thing of like, this is something that I'm going to get in on now. It's not something that I can always go to because he's done this before. It's something he's doing now.
Yeah, there's not many people that use most copy. I see simple present. It's just teaches or helps or go from. It's not going. Coach reveals how he's helping 200 software businesses scale. It's how he helped them. It's past tense. Or that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, the difference is amazing. It's how it's present progressive. It's the more you show something is happening now. In fact, there's a book, Pitch Anything, by Boron. I forget his last name, but he talked about a confluence of things that make it feel like there's a train moving and you got to hop on it, right? So that's what present progressive does is, I want to hop on this bandwagon while Matthew is teaching all of these great copywriters, these copywriters to become great wordsmiths. And so I feel like that is it's a subtle difference. It's hidden psychology is what it is, that is different from, where everybody, one of the things people talk about is the things that they've done in the past, right? That they were the industry first for this, or the industry first for that. And it's different, that's like, there's an accolade, there's a feather in the cap, but what does that mean to me? How does it benefit me that you did something that was really successful 20 years ago? But it benefits me a lot if you're teaching people just like me to do something that I want to do right now. So it's, and again, I don't always use this formula at all. I have a whole system for doing it, but it is, authority is providing, XYZ benefit to called out prospect. And so one of the things that I also believe, and I'll give you another quick tip, because it's a really easy one for me. Copywriters vary when they're working with clients. There are copywriters who are, they have a deadline, right? And so you don't know how much time you have to put into it. Excuse me, I got to cough one more time. Edit that out. So the copywriters, let's suppose you have a deadline. I have hacks for, okay, I got to get this headline and I have to have it done in 5 minutes versus I get to work on this and I'm not putting this out for 20, 30 days. And there's a whole lot, of course, the more time you have, the better it is. But there are hacks. And when you learn the hacks, you can actually turn around and come up with something better. So when you're reading copy, there are 4 types of readers that you are, and this is another editing tip. The first thing you're doing with your editing is making sure that people are willing to make the decision to try reading your copy. So if it is all blocked and there's no paragraph breaks, and it's really long and everything, it looks onerous and people don't want to do it. If it looks like they can just scroll through it and there's subheads and they can look at the part that they're interested in, they'll give it a shot. But there's the OCD person who's going to start reading from the very beginning and read towards all the way through to the end, or until they find that they're bored, right? And then pull out. Then there are the people who are going to skim the copy and decide whether or not they're going to start reading from the top again. Then there are people who are going to read it. They're going to see a subhead or a section that really applies to them, and then they're going to start reading from there and then go into the copy at that point and then continue reading down, right? And then there are people who will literally just read
Like
the
me,
headline,
by the way.
the bullets.
I think that
Okay.
I think I'm the third one. Yeah.
Oh,
I just
okay.
skim and then somewhere and I get caught in and I go for it. Yeah.
And then there's people who read they read the bullets, the headlines, and the PS, right? At the bottom. People really should still use PSs. I don't care if it's a landing page. And they make a buying decision, they're real quick buying decisions based on that information, right? So when you're editing it, so this is why your subhead has to flow from the copy that leads to the subhead and flow for the reader right after the subhead as if they just started at that and didn't need to read the part before. Okay. And so, but the PS is really important. So here's my hack for a PS. And I don't always use this because when writing, I'll often come up with a better PS. I just say, remember, restate the benefit and then put in the sense of urgency that you had in the copy, because it flows no matter which of those readers you got. So I'll say, remember, Matthew can turn you into a world-class copywriter and set your career on fire and get you, and put you to, give you that nomad laptop lifestyle you want, or whatever the benefit is that you want to do them, and, show you how to sign 7-figure clients within 30 days or whatever it is. So you say, remember, Matthew can do all that, but, there's only 10 spaces left in his program. And so you better, you got to hop on it now, right? So all of these readers, right? The first person, it's reinforcing and kicking off and reminding of the sense of urgency and the benefit they want. That's for the OCD reader and all the others. But the person who reads it all and then decides to go back at the beginning and start reading, right? This gives them a sense of urgency to make them say, I got to finish reading this now. Because
I got to actually see what's going on here. Yeah.
And so that's a great hack to make sure that, your ending sentence that's down there, because so many people are scrolling down to find out what the price is, to see if this is worth checking out. They are, there's all these different types of readers. And so this takes the reader who goes at the beginning, comes down, kicks them off the edge. It takes the people at the top, goes down, kicks them off the fence. It takes the people who skim it to decide whether or not they're going to read it from the beginning and makes them read it now, right? And then it's also great for the people who just buy from the headline, the bullets, and the PS.
That's great. Wow. So you just put the urgency and you put the core benefit of the sales message.
I restate the benefit, the core benefit, and then the sense of urgency. That's I want the sense of urgency to be their last thought.
Benefit and then urgency. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really strong. I don't think I've done that before. I'm going to try that. That's really good.
Okay. So I'll tell you why, where this comes about. When I took these, I don't know, personality IQ tests or whatever, and they say I'm really good at pattern recognition. And I've read so much copy over the years, right? And so what happens is, this is based on, tried and true, tested kind of like, I'd see these things in winning copy and stuff like that. And I'm like, what's the real pattern here? And then I would come up with a formula that tells you that. So now, see, this is the way that I kind of teach. You can do that. Now, will your PS look the same as everybody else's? No, right? Your PS, but the so it's kind of like a system that's not a template, right?
Yeah, I like it.
Because, and I'll tell you something. Here are the two things that I want to see if I'm going to be in competition with somebody for writing, which I'm not going to be. But if I'm in competition with somebody who's writing, I want them to be one of two things. I want them to start thinking about copy while they're staring at their computer and opening it up and saying, okay, I got to write this today, right? You're going to get crushed by anybody who's been walking around thinking about talking points, doing research, putting in time and effort, and, walking in the shoes of their prospects. And, you just, has thought of, you should be sitting down and just, putting out so much information on that thing and then hacking it away to fit and to cut. Like you were talking about earlier, you wrote the big long opening and then you cut it down to what was the real core essential. That makes it more powerful and more impactful. The second thing I want people to do is start by reading swipes in the same industry or niche.
Oh,
and the reason I want them to do that, my dad is the reason everybody does this. It's his fault. So what he told people to do is if you want to find good ads, and what you do is you go to back then it was the National Enquirer, but you see ads repeated over and over again, right? For a long time. And that way, if they knew they were spending money, not free stuff, but if they knew they were spending money, then it was working. And so you took that ad and you swiped it out of the newspaper and put it into a file. And I'm going to give you a tip on this as well. And then what you did is when you needed to come up with a headline, you would peruse these files and get an idea and spark ideas, but they weren't all, if you were doing a furniture ad, they weren't all furniture ads, right? If you were writing a furniture piece, they weren't all furniture ads. And so but everybody took it as like, let me look at what everybody else is doing in, selling furniture. Right. And so what's going to happen with your brain if you've just read 30 ads on furniture before you start writing? You've primed your brain to not think uniquely and to start, you're most likely going to start coming out speaking, like one of those ads, which means you're not going to stand out. You're not going to have that unique talking point. You're not going to have that unique perspective that makes your ads stand out differently. So here's the secret to do. So my dad, one time somebody came up and said, look, Gary, look what I did. And he took one of my dad's ad and just kind of like plugged in his details. And he thought my dad was going to be proud of him because he thought my dad taught him to swipe ads, right? My dad got all pissed off. I think he started yelling at him. He's like, what the hell are you doing? You just stole my ad or whatever. But here's the way to do it. Get a collection of swipe files, whether it's landing pages and anything else. Cut it up. Have a file that is just headlines. Have a file that is just openings. Have a file that is just subheads. Have a file that's just bullets. Have a file that's just closing arguments. Have a file that's just postscripts. Have a file that is just proof elements, right? Have a file that's just stories. And that way, when you're stuck on that part of the copy, you looking at them from many different industries and areas, that will spark ideas. And when you do it, it will not look like you just ripped everybody off.
That's fantastic.
Okay? Yeah. So, cut it up, chop them up, and, put that file together. So, I think it's funny because people will go through these ads. There's only one person I know that's really great. And by the way, you have to do it with different industries for it to work. So I don't know. You're not old enough to remember you remember there was a promotion called the Rich Jerk? It was a long time ago. There was this promotion called the Rich Jerk, and it took everybody by storm. And it was like, it was all of a sudden, it was like, it was totally new. This is somebody throwing stuff at the wall, see if it would fit. It would stick. And it did. Everybody's like, yeah, I'm a rich jerk. And this is how I got rich. And don't you want to be rich too? And all this other stuff. Well, if you saw that and said, that's fantastic, and then you just put out a program called The Wealthy Bastard, that wasn't, everybody's like, you're just ripping off the rich jerk. It's no different, right?
Yeah, everybody knows instantly. Yeah.
Everybody knew it. So the point is, stop ripping off and templating and modeling after everybody in your niche. Model off after other people's niches. And there's only one person I know that, and by the way, when you do that, sometimes this story is based on a fantastic story this ad's based on a fantastic journey of the company owner, right? And your company owner doesn't have a fantastic journey. So you're trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, right? And so it doesn't perfectly fit. I've only seen one person who has such a huge swap file that they're going like, okay, this ad fits perfectly for adapting, and it's always a different industry, but adapting to this other industry. And so you don't, I mean, it's kind of like a pet peeve to me. But here's another Gary Halbert way of thinking. I'm glad that he did that, and I'm glad that everybody else is doing that. And the reason I want all the other copywriters to model after everybody else's niche is because it makes me so much stand out, right? I
Yeah.
want, my dad was always like, people would say, your dad can sell ice to Eskimos. I'm like, you don't get it. My dad was about like making an irresistible offer. He wanted to sell heaters to Eskimos. I don't want competition to be hard and everybody to
Yeah.
be great.
Yeah.
I want the competition to be easy. So when you hear people complaining, oh man, look at this copy sucks. It's like, that's good news for you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And to add to this, with AI these days, I think there's like a third aspect to this now as well, right? Where you have the copy that everybody's swiping, but now everybody just takes all the different. They'll grab the ad copy, they'll grab the VSL transcript, they'll grab everything from all their competitors, and they'll just feed it as one large data set to AI, right? It's like, oh, study this and give me an ideal customer profile, breakdown, or give me a creative brief, and then it gives you the creative brief, but it's all based on everything else everybody else is saying and promising, right? So it's now just, it sounds like everything else. It's like, great, now, so essentially what everybody's doing is they're taking their 5 to 10 competitors and they're asking AI to write something that sounds exactly like their top 5 to 10 competitors. So it's exactly the same, and AI produces it. And I think it's the best, because I laugh to myself and say, well, it's, you're going to have it'll be maybe 7 out of 10. I think the market will probably care because it's something that everybody else is talking about. But is it going to explode? It's not necessarily going to be that explosive thing,
And you have to feed that AI copy to people who haven't read all the other copy. I mean, you have to find the prospects that haven't done that, and that can work. It depends. So I'll give you an example. This, I would say the only absolute marketing is there's no absolutes. So if you were doing, let's say, a roofing company ad, right? People who are looking for roofs just discovered there's a leak in their roof, right? Nobody's been reading roofing ads for the last year and a half, right? Copywriters are paying attention to other copy courses and copy books and copy information for a long period of time. That's the thing. Like, there's, in our industry, Ben Settle did the whole industry a favor by telling everybody email your list every day, right? And the reason for it is everybody else was letting their emails get stale, their lists get stale. And, then the business owner would go to mail it. They'd see that the spam complaints went up because they forgot that they had been on that list. Everybody, there's always an unsubscribe when you mail your list. And people got so afraid to mail their list, but then they're like, okay, now I'm not going to mail it till I get something really good. So they wait even longer between the next mailing. And then when they wait even longer, the spam things go up. But you don't want to hear from your plumber every single day, right? So the point is, you can get away with AI copy a lot easier if somebody's going to have a very short amount of time that they're going to be interested in that niche or that topic. The more the more that somebody, like, this is a bigger part of their life for a longer period of time, the more likely they're going to recognize this is a lot like what everything else that they've seen. Okay. So AI, and this is the way that I say it, is, if you can come up with unique talking points, use AI, clean it up, learn to punch up copy. You can, as you learn to be a better writer and punch up copy, you can make money as you're learning to be a better at punching up copy, as you're learning to be a better story writer. Because the truth is, there is no magic formula that's going to make you good right away. You always get better the more you write, so get to writing. But that's a way that you can actually start to get paid, as a copywriter, as you do this and stuff like that. So I think AI is a great tool. It's specifically great for a person like me. My dad thought, so my dad's proteges, they had different fortes. So one was like a really great salesman, like Caleb O'Dowd. Another one really was good at studying offers, like Sam Markowitz and everything. I was big idea, and big idea could be a unique hook, offer, solution, and everything, and a unique way of looking at things. So AI is fantastic for me because it saves me the part that's, much more time intensive. So I can go for a walk
Mm.
and come up with some really good talking points. And when I would, they're like, even when I would speak and everything, they're like trying to, one comment, which I love, but maybe it was a little too much maybe I was, saying I need to slow down, it was like trying to drink from a fire hose. Oh, sorry about that. So it was like kind of drink from a fire hose. So if I can spit out all of these ideas that are unique and make everybody go, hey, wait a minute. And my goal was always before to make somebody who's very experienced, like you turning around and saying, that's an interesting idea about the PS thing, or that's an interesting thing about present progressive. That means a ton to me. And the reason is because if I can teach brand new, or veteran copywriters new tricks, and that's one of the reasons that I did do the editing thing, because I would have really experienced copywriters say, hey, can you look at my copy? And I go over and I say, this is really good, but I would take this part and I would change this to this. I'd move this to that. And then I was eventually like, you know what? I'm just going to write a book about formulating how this process is working and what I'm
I like
thinking
it.
and
Yeah.
what I'm doing and stuff.
Mm.
But AI, the more, if you're if you think in these unique kind of concept ways, AI is like, it's a great tool for someone like me. But if if you're not really good at creative writing and saying things in a way that's unique, it's not, you have to be all of these things. If you can think of new unique talking points and a unique way of making people think things, if you can get somebody to say, aha, I never thought of it that way, that makes a lot of sense. I'll give you one more example that I love. And I love I like to give you real life examples as well, because they can be used and adapted for marketing. My daughter was 15 and she was talking with her friends at school. And she said that, they were talking about getting a car. And one of her friends said, my dad says I can have a car, or my dad said I can't get one. He doesn't trust me to drive. Right. Another one said, my dad said I can have a car, but I have to work up and save for it and pay for it. My daughter says, my dad already bought me a car because he says that that drugs and gang violence is not the real danger for kids. It's it's being riding in a car being driven by a teenage boy. So
Oh,
he's buying me. Okay, see that
there you
reaction.
go.
So
Right. Yeah.
he
Yeah.
says
Yeah.
seeing
Right. It's
buying
good.
that. He said, he's buying the car on the caveat that I don't ride with any teenage boys driving, and you don't let any boys drive her car. Right. And so, and
It's
then I
good though.
guarantee
Yeah.
you, if these girls took that argument back to their fathers would be like, oh, you know what? That's right. I better get her a car.
It's a really good.
But
It's really good
so
though. Yeah.
so my
Mm.
son, I was talking to him about that, and we were talking about how a car dealership could do a campaign based on that. Do you have a teenage daughter? I'm gonna, these are the 5 or 6 safest cars, and here's why you need to make sure that she's got a car. You can make an entire campaign about that. You know what I'm saying? But you see how I get you to go, oh yeah, I never thought of it that way. That kind of thinking, if you can do that and then you use AI, that's fantastic. If you are a master storyteller, you can say kind of similar things that everybody else is saying and still get an edge because you're doing something better than AI can do it. Because AI
Mm.
also can't tell when it's being boring. That's another disadvantage of it. It can't say something unique, and it really can't.
Right.
It
Mm.
really can't turn around and go, I'm saying this stuff. It's boring because it's just doing it predicted off of what the next word was said in last 20 times that somebody had used the previous word. So, and if you can edit better than everybody else, so if you can do any of those, if you can do research, unique ideas, and selling points and stuff like that, better storytelling, or any of those other things, you can beat anybody else just using AI, because those are the key components that go into great copy. And it's very rare that everybody is great at all of those. Some of the master storytellers aren't great with really unique ideas and selling points. Some of the People who are fantastic at editing, aren't the best at the storytelling and stuff like that. So all you got to do is if you can be better than AI and more unique in one of those areas, you will have an advantage.
Hmm. How do you go about figuring out what that one thing is that you should spend a lot of time on? Because I had a coach that told me, you're really good at email. And so I spent a long time in email and I liked it. But I found it's because I also really enjoyed email more than a lot of long form copy. But then another coach told me that, your writing is very simple and clean. It's clean. It flows well. So I just had coaches tell me, do you reckon that's probably the best way to go is to just get an expert to tell you where your strengths are? Or is there like a self-diagnosis about this too?
I think it is. Well, I think that what you need, well, first of all, coaches, yes and no. The reason I say no sometimes is because a coach will be like, this is the part that I'm really good at teaching. So then they want to, that's the part that they're going to
Yeah,
focus on.
makes
I'm
sense.
really good at storytelling, so I want to teach you more storytelling where you may not need that skill as much. And I find the problem with, everybody learns in a different way. So, let's talk about one that's very controversial, which is handwriting out copy.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Good. I like controversial stuff. Yeah.
So, this actually is not, my dad didn't invent the technique. There was Hunter S. Thompson, I believe, used to type out The Great Gatsby and whole books to try and get their rhythm and their flow and everything. But so there are a lot of people who say, well, no, it doesn't work. It's a waste of time. Most of them haven't put a lot of time into it, but there are some people who put time into it that I think put in a genuine effort and they didn't get anything out of it. Okay. So, so it just proves that people learn differently. There are some people who I consider to be like the best copywriters in the world who swear that that was the best exercise they've ever done. Okay. And there are other people who are really great copywriters that didn't do it. So let me tell you if you're going to try this, how to make it more valuable. First of all, if you're going to pick up the writing style of whoever you're copying quite easily, if you hang out with a core group of guys from high school, not from your high school, but just let's suppose they all went to a different high school than you, and you start hanging out with these people. And several hours a day, it's not going to take that long before you start sounding like them, right? You start
Hmm.
using similar words and, kind of even the cadence and tone and stuff like that. So that's one of the things that you're picking up on. So make sure that you're picking up on somebody who's relevant, somebody that you like, and whatever it is. But the other thing is what you have to study copywriting before you try this exercise. So in other words, you need to study editing, you need to study attention, interest, desire, and action. You need to understand personalization, copy, making it conversational, making it smooth, using simple words versus more complicated words, all of these kinds of things. So when you're handwriting it out, it slows you down and makes you recognize that that's an example. And that's why, look, this was a simple word he used. This is where he realizes that, that he's putting in the risk reversal, and it slows you down and makes you pay attention to that part of the copywriting system, and I don't mean like system, I mean, the process. And so you get more out of it. You're like, oh, I get this risk reversal part now, right? And the timing of when to put that in. So what I do is I say at this point, somebody's going to be asking, well, what about this? Right. And so what I do is I take that question, I actually take the answer, turn that into a sentence and move it up just a little bit before they're going to have that thought. Right. I want to give
Okay.
everybody their thoughts. I don't want to have them have the thought and then wonder it. So back to
That's
that
smart.
headline thing,
Hmm.
when we're talking about it, we're saying, like a risk reversal. If they're going to be wondering, if risk reversal is going to be something they're thinking about throughout the whole ad, put it at the top. you
Right.
know, so
Yeah.
it's just out of the way. It's done. If they're going to be wondering where the pitch is, put the pitch at the top. But anyway,
Oh, I've seen someone do that. Okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, I was
it
like,
makes
why are they putting the pitch at the top? It's like, because that's actually the very first thing I was thinking about when I clicked that page. I was like, what is this that they're about to sell me? And he's
yeah.
like, here's the TLDR. Here's the pitch. I'm about to pitch you. Here it is. And now if you want more details, keep reading. And I was like, oh, Interesting. Yeah.
100%. And,
Mm.
so I mean, when you're going through copy, don't stick on a completely strict formula and everything like that. You need to understand where they are. And so I'll take their question, or the point where I think they're going to have the question, and then I'm going to answer it right before that. And then if they're going to be like, well, where are the proof that this person is happening? I'll put the proof just a little bit above that. And you just you're trying to understand where they're thinking and where their heads at throughout the whole process. And you're gonna end up with better stuff or better copy. And my the one of the things that's funny about AI is everybody came out and they said, they'd ask AI, write this like Gary Halbert, right?
Yeah,
And
I've
there's
seen
a
this.
huge problem with that. And the problem is, there are people with a certain writing style. And I can say this because he agreed that I thought it was a good description. John Carlton writes like a mixture of Jack Kerouac, Stephen King, and Hunter S. Thompson. He's like the three of those personalities put together, and he writes stuff like that. He's got that. My dad's writing is not like that. You can read one ad and it sounds completely different tone and everything from another. In fact, he did one ad and he's actually written the piece, which is the section is supposed to be written from like 4 different people, like the executive of the company, the movie star who's endorsing it, the scientist who helped invent it, and all this. And it sounds like 4 different people, which, by the way, is a great technique, because by the time you're done reading it, you're hearing 4 or 5 people telling you this is a fantastic product.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Okay. Yeah. So back to handwriting. So what happens is but my dad's thing, he didn't sound like everybody else. And the majority of his writing would be his newsletter. So everything would say, "Dear friend," right? Which he never really started an ad saying. He may have done one or something, but he didn't. A newsletter or a sales letter to his list might say "Dear friend," but for the most part, you couldn't get a Gary Halbert style, because my dad used to feel like you don't want them to pay attention to your writing. You want to pay attention to what you said. So when I told you the story about my daughter, it wasn't like, oh, he said that and he used this twist and the way it worked. You're paying attention to the message, right?
Yeah.
That's the most important part. But when you slow down to handwrite, then what happens is it connects, right? And you're like, okay, this is where it clicked. I understood how this is not everybody. And I'm going to get to that in a second. This is not everybody that this does this for. But it does it for a whole lot of people when they do the exercise, but not if that's the first thing they start doing. They should be studying copywriting for quite a while and know, when it's attention, when it's interest, how to transition that, make how it's fueling them to do desire, the words that they're using, like, that are conversational, and say, like, you would never, like, a word that we'll use in copy that's conversational, you'd never see in a college paper is anyway. So anyway, then I went on to do this and this and that. College paper is not going to say that, but you and I would say that in a conversation, right? And so so you give that a shot and see if that helps you. But when it comes to it, some people learn, they have to read it and then they see it. Some people have to hear it. And the one thing that really helps is coming into having mentors that read it. So I've sat there with people who've read my book on editing, and I'll give an example of, I'll do like a pronoun hunt, right? And so when you're writing stuff, you use pronouns because you're writing. And so, let's suppose I'm writing about Matthew, right? And I say, Matthew teaches copywriters to be, to get to scale to 5 figures really quickly, right? And I probably wouldn't use the word scale. I would start, to start nabbing clients that are, just to sound different from everybody else. To land those 5-figure, consistently land those 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure clients, and so forth. And Matthew does this, and Matthew does this, and Matthew does this. But I won't do that. You won't do that. So I'll say, and then he does this, and then his system, and I'll use those pronouns, right? Well, here's another trick that I'll use is before doing that, I will write down before doing the editing, not before writing. You never let anything stop your flow writing. Just keep writing. Do not stop and overthink it and back up and change anything. Edit, edit, edit later. Don't stop the copy dump. Always just keep going. But what I'll
Just
do
remove the
later,
backspace key completely.
yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to put that, by the way. And so what I'll do is I'll write all the ways I want to describe Matthew. And I'll say this master copywriting instructor, this legendary wordsmith, so
Nice.
forth and so on.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
all of these times I've used him and his and stuff like that, I will be able to replace those with those descriptions. So I'll say, so Matthew is a master marketer. And once you have this, legendary wordsmith's formula, for success,
Yeah.
you'll start landing
Okay.
those
I see how that
7-figure
works.
clients.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, but here's the hidden psychology in that. The hidden psychology is the studies have shown that once somebody hears something 20 times, it's hard to disabuse them of believing that that's true because they've heard it 20 times. This is a way of me telling everybody that you're great 20 times without them having to hear, in a very short period of time.
It's direct association. There's no like, he is a legendary copywriter. It's this legendary copywriter. And then the content that they're thinking about is the end of the sentence. They're not thinking about that word. They're just kind of going along with it. And eventually I like that.
Yeah.
That's
And
really
I'm saying,
good.
I'm saying 20 different ways of how fantastic you are. You know what I'm saying?
That's great.
This future A-lister or whatever it is that, this current A-lister, you would turn around and say, I would write all those descriptions. And I do that for you do it for the product, you do it for the personality that you're selling. You're doing it for the, for all these things. So one of the things that I really do, because my dad's editing for me and I give it to everybody because he's giving it to everybody. It's real short. I think there's 5 things. There's shorter paragraphs, shorter sentences, 5th grade language, do a that hunt. Most of the time we use the word that. And I'll use this one as an example to finish off the talking about getting your copy read by a professional. Is my dad would say, 90% of the time you use the word that, it is unnecessary and it'll flow more smoothly. And read your copy out loud. That was the 5th one, by the way. Every time you use the word that, you don't really you don't need to use it. And so when you write a sentence and then you can read it without the word that and it flows smoothly, you remove the that. And so if I teach this to somebody or my dad teaches this to somebody, and then I'm going over your copy and I said, okay, see how you got the that there and you don't need it. And you see how we read it again without the that. Oh, that's when it clicks. You knew the lesson. You heard the lesson. You remembered the lesson. It wasn't until you saw it in your own writing and somebody pointed it out. Somebody, you see how you use the word obtain? Why don't you use the word get? It's simpler. Nobody complains that your copy is too simple. Right? That you're too clear and concise. Nobody complains that it's too concise, nobody complains that, you didn't use a $10 word, right? Nobody complains about those things. But you can see that when a person is looking over your work and they're diving, and they're editing it in the process and showing and explaining to you why. Like if I just take your copy and I edit it, you're not going to learn the lesson the same as me and you sitting down there and me going over your copy. And this is the point. This is if you really want to be a great copywriter, and you don't not everybody wants to be a great copywriter. Some people want to be good enough. Some people want to become legendary. And bust record controls and stuff like that. But all the top copywriters have a few things in common. There are things that help become a great copywriter, but they all work hard. A lot that idea that, they're just sitting by the pool, they flipped open the laptop and they're just like, da, 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 and I wrote a $20 million winner. Total BS. Nothing like that has happened. They are putting in more time in their research than you are. They are putting more time in their editing than you are, right? The first draft is going to be just that. They're going to write, 10 pages and then hack it down to where every word has earned its place, and that it would be painful to really, it would change the results if they cut a word out of it, right? They want to shorten it, make it, quick.
Airtight.
Yeah, they want to make it conversational. So, you don't want to cut corners in those areas. And so, there are other things that make people great copywriters that not all of them have. Like empathy helps you, but there's a lot of people who are great that don't have a lot of empathy. There are, being somebody who's curious. That, you talked earlier about wanting to understanding how other people think and what their lives are like, and what they're going through. People who are curious about everything. So you'll notice most of the very top copywriters in a niche are part of that niche, right? So they're perfect. That's what made my
Yeah.
dad so amazing. He could sell to a housewife, a young housewife or a middle-aged housewife, even though he never was one. He could sell to a working Joe contractor, even though he never was one. He could sell to an executive who's very busy at a corporation but he never was one. Whereas everybody else, it's like they will sell to a niche, but that niche is mostly dominated by people who are like them. They are also self-made, pretty well off to do, middle-aged, white guys, and of a certain whatever it is, political persuasion or whatever it is. And so what they can do, so I'll go back to my own example. So I can sell to the people who, I can do a great ad for a tactical flashlight. I could probably also do a great ad for a tactical knife. I could also do a great ad, for the things that these same people, these same buyers are buying. But if you're really empathetic and curious and can understand both, different types of people and what they're going through, you can sell to more different types of people and step into their shoes mentally a lot easier. But and finally, so what I'm going to say about the learning process, you have to find out, who resonates with you, which books, which courses, which membership programs, which mentors, and all of that other stuff. And nobody really, the best of the best get different, none of the good people have one copywriting book. None of them have one copywriting course. Most of them have, gone into programs and mentorships with several people, and they find that somebody's really great and clicks in this area. Somebody's better at teaching them how to get gigs, where somebody's better at teaching them how to write stories, and somebody's better at teaching them how to do research and stuff like that. And so, I think that all of these different ways are, you have to explore them and find out who and which format, again, is better for you. Some people just, they learn better with YouTube videos than they do reading a book. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer. Sorry about that.
No, but that was really interesting. I like it. It makes a lot of sense to me. I think I learn a lot of different things from a lot of different people. Matt Fury, for example, I spent a lot of time consuming some stuff from Matt Fury. And Matt Fury, I learned to love email because of listening to his seminars talking about how fun it is to write emails, and to me, the energy that he brought to the craft when he would sit and think about things, he would visualize. I think he said somewhere in the seminar, you have to imagine the prospect taking out their wallet and taking out their credit card and spending money with you. And I enjoyed that exercise. I was imagining all these people spending money. And so it was fun, so that for me really is part of why I personally love spending a lot of time thinking about the idea before I write anything. Maybe I'll write down 2 or 3 bullets about the thing I like, and then I will go ahead and just go all in and write a first draft after I have a couple of, big things I'm thinking about, I learned something from one of my copy coaches. He doesn't have a course or anything. It was just a copy coach in a direct response company I used to work with. And he's very, very brutal when it comes to editing. Very, very brutal. He would highlight the whole piece of copy and he would just say, no, that's it. That's this feedback on the whole piece. And I like it too, because, he actually, it's funny. We chat recently, more often. And I was telling him, like as friends now, not just as like a learning from him. We chat as friends, and I would say, you really helped me in my career. And he would say to me, I think I was a bit hard on you. And I said, no, I really liked it, because when you said no, you forced me to think about this with the critical perspective, with a very skeptical, not impressed, not sold, not interested perspective, what does the copy look like with that lens versus the, oh, this is great, or I want to get this out, or I want to get paid and just move on from the project. I had that other voice in my head. So that really helped me become a better editor, you know? So yeah, to your point, right? You pull different things from different people. Matt Fury was much more, aspirational energy when I was thinking of writing, and that helps me in the beginning. But I don't think I would be able to use that same, imagine them pulling out your credit card while I'm editing. I wouldn't be able to bring that into the editing process. Like, oh yeah, of course they'll want to buy this. This is great. No need to edit this.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think, some of the people, like, they're the best bullet writers in the world. But again, when it comes to copy, there's headlines, bullets, PSs, so, closing arguments, risk reversal, and all these other stuff. And that's why having those swipe files of good, chopped up into different files will help you make it better at the one places. And you can start you doing that to hone in on the part that you need to improve. But yeah, you should be learning from everybody. And oh, by the way, that's the other thing that really, really great copywriters do is they continue to learn. I'm in the business, you're in the business. So a lot of other people are in the business of teaching people copy, right? And the hardest sell in the world is somebody who is already a full-time working copywriter, right? They don't think that they're going to learn anything new from you. So now, even though if you do, so, you have to get them at, I don't know if you want to call it lower level, market level awareness, but you have to get them earlier when they're still at the point where they're growing. Now that is not everybody though, because some of the top copywriters, they are paying attention. And I used to make it my job, because, I'm, my dad is a legend, right? Absolutely. And then if I putting out stuff and doing my own stuff that's new that he's never taught and everything, that turns it into a legacy. My son taking it on, if he doesn't add his own stuff, it turns it into a dynasty, right? But
that's cool.
So I always found it my job. I never really gave his speeches unless I was giving it as an example of how I learned to do this and create a new modern version of it. And so I've only done that even once, everything else. But I found I was like, to validate, that I was coming up with something new. If I gave a speech in front of a group of people, job was to make the most experienced marketers in the rooms hand hurt from taking so many notes. And when I would see somebody who's like a 30-year veteran copywriter who everybody respects going up and like taking notes and saying, go take some pictures of those slides and stuff like that. Then I was like, okay, I knew I hit my mark, right? And then I realized, okay, I have to back it down and, slow it down a bit and stuff like that. But I think, it's you need to continue learning, period, and you learn from everywhere and everything. That's the problem. If you're learning copy, if you're just learning copy from studying swipe files, right? You're not listening and paying attention when somebody makes a great comment on the radio. Or a layman who has nothing, or a non-copywriter makes a comment that makes you sit up and pay attention. If you're not, learning persuasion from all these different, areas in life, wherever anybody is persuading somebody else to do something different, you're going to be at a disadvantage to the people who, never stop learning, and you do want to do that. There are some veteran copywriters who've been in the business 20, 30 years, and they don't stop learning. They're trying to pay attention to everything new that comes along. And I think that's a great attitude to have, because, if you don't adapt, I would imagine that my dad would have adapted. Right. And, to more modern times and more modern techniques and stuff like that. But the core fundamentals never change. So there was a story, Ron LeGrand, he was is a very famous, and he had this, how to buy property for investing course. And it was making monster amount of money, lots of cash. And he said, you know what? I'm going to hire all the top copywriters in the world to, each write a piece, and I'm just going to test them against each other. And he did. And my dad came out way ahead of whoever was number two, right? It wasn't
Really?
even like,
Oh,
he
interesting.
beat him by 4% or whatever. It's like he blew everybody away. And he said, all those guys, they did this, and they may have had experience in writing, real estate and all this other stuff. But what I did that, that was why I won that. And you say, why? And he would say, I knew exactly what the prospect needed to hear in order to buy. So he was in the shoes, he was in the mental framework of the person that was there. And so, and so there's all these courses, and they teach you, okay, you need these, you got to put in these testimonies, you got to have risk reversal, you have to do this, you have to do that, and so forth and so on. That's all sort of true to a degree. Some of the stuff doesn't need to be there, but how much of something they need can be different depending on what it is they're buying compared to where it
Hmm.
is they are in their life, and, what market level awareness they're at. So if you're at market level awareness, where what the solutions are, you just don't know which one's right for you. Three of your five testimonials need to be about, hey, I tried, 14 or four of these things, and I learned better this way. And so this was definitely the right solution. The testimonial needs to say,
Hmm.
basically, this is the one that is right for you, and this is the reasoning why. Whereas, and you only need one to say, yes, it worked like as advertised or something like that, so, you figure out where they are, because, these people weren't selling to people who are already savvy, investors. They were selling to people who were thinking about buying their first investment property, and what they need to hear in order to buy. And, they need to hear that it was going to be a safe investment. They needed to know that it was, that they were going to have support throughout the whole, throughout the process, and that there wasn't going to be any unexpected hidden surprises that were going to ruin the whole experience for them. And they needed more information because they were going to be making, a certain amount of investment that, represented a good chunk of what they earned. And, again, it's, you just need to understand that prospect so well. So you say, this is what they're concerned about, this is what they're not. So, they say $17 is the, I forget, I'm slipping my mind. $17 is the, I want to say throwaway price point, but it's impulse. It's the impulse buy. Like, nobody cares if what they spent $17 on doesn't turn out to be good. Right. So when they buy a book and they're complaining and the book is $17, they don't say, well, this book really should have been $5. They're complaining about the time they spent reading, right?
Yeah. Okay. Hmm.
So what they want to do is say, this was worth every minute that I spent reading this book. That's a better testimonial for it.
Ah,
Then
right.
this is worth, then this
Oh,
is,
that's good. Yeah.
yeah. So
You're making me
that's,
take too many notes, Bond. Like, I'll tell you right now, I'm going to quickly jump in. I've had, not even joking, I've had 5 questions that I'm thinking, I wrote down some notes while you were saying something. I was like, oh, I really want to know his thoughts on this. And not even joking, within 30 seconds, you started talking about the thing I was about to ask you a question on. So there's this inception going on here in this interview. And I only realized it in the last 5 minutes here, that all the questions I was going to ask you, actually, like you almost predicted it. I don't know if it was something that, but it's, it's kind of scary, actually. It's a really good demonstration of, what we've been talking about, knowing exactly kind of what the person that's listening or is thinking about is actually thinking about. So that's really good.
no,
I
I mean,
like that. It's like, yeah,
it's what I want to hear. I mean, the other thing I think that great marketers do is they create win-win-win-win situations. It's not a zero-sum game where I win or you win. It
yeah.
should be, the people who watch this should win and get, some value out of it. You should get some value out of it, and I should get some value out of it. And, that's what, I think good marketers try and create a win for everybody. And so, no, to hear somebody at your level turn around and say, I'm taking notes and you're giving me new, fresh ideas. That helps me. It validates that, what I'm providing is something that, you know, is useful, and so I really appreciate that feedback as well.
Well, it is cool. I got to tell you, because I was going to ask you, how does it look different today compared to the past? And when I was going to ask you about that, then you sort of started to talk about how it's all about knowing what the frame is of the prospect as they are right now. So that kind of answers it. It's the frame back then was they enjoyed reading to the point where it would be something that they would spend more time on, whereas today they're more bored. If you're in that frame, you're actually thinking from that frame. You kind of have the copy writes itself a lot of the time. I think this is something I learned from David Deutsch. He used to say when I was consuming his content, or he is saying, right, because he still says it. He says, good ideas, when you have a good idea, the copy writes itself.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so when you really know where something's at, great ideas. I've been saying this for a while now, and I attribute it to David. It's like great ideas write themselves. Great ideas, the copy writes itself.
I agree with it 100%, because people talk about, well, what do you do with writer's block? It's like you do enough research where you can't where your question should be, where do I start? I have so much to say, where do I start? And then you throw up on the page. And by the way, there's another trick for people. Where do you start is there's different hacks for it. So one of the ones that I like to use is, you imagine somebody, let's suppose whatever it is you're going to sell, let's suppose you're going to sell stereo equipment, and you think of somebody who is the biggest audiophile in your life, right? And let's suppose this person is, a female named Jane. You say, you just start off, you say, "Dear Jane, I just read some amazing stuff that I thought you'd be really interested in, because I know that you like, audiophile stuff." And then you just start writing. You write all the points you want to make. I heard about this, this really unique new type of speaker that's, does all of this. And you just write the entire piece, right? You may end up writing a page and a half that you throw away, right? Until you get to that point, you go, "Oh, this is the point I need to start with," and I think John Carlton or somebody calls it clearing your throat, stuff like that. But you just start with that hack and you will just start writing. But the point is, you don't start writing till you have a ton of stuff to say. And you're like, I hope I can fit it all in. And you said something earlier about, the space and cutting, your headline down. And I remember once my father's assistant was going for a new job, and she says, your dad's not around, everything. So and she had worked with me. So she wanted to, and this will tie down a few things that I said. She asked me to write her a testimonial letter, a reference. So I wrote the letter, and I knew exactly what these people wanted to hear, that she was a self-starter, that she could handle team projects and manage stuff, but she also was a team player. So if you just gave her, marching orders, she wouldn't gripe and complain. She could handle all of our projects, she was trustable. When it came down to the money, everything was down to the penny, it was accurate and all this other stuff. And I knew at one point they were going to be wondering, well, if she's so great, why don't you work with her? And I said, if we still lived in the same state, I would hire her in a heartbeat. So I was answering that objection right before it happened. And I said to anybody,
everything's copy.
Yeah, and I said to anybody who, to anybody who's reading this, if you're considering it, if you hire her, for even, give her a trial for even 1 week and it doesn't work out, you call me and I will send you $100 out of my pocket. That's how assured I am of doing this, right? But I spent the most time in writing that reference letter trying to get it into one page, because I didn't want, I know that this person is going to be, this is another thing I learned from my father, understand what they're going through and where they are when they receive your sales message. This is a sales message, right? To say, hire this person. So they're sitting there looking at a stack of references and letters and all this other stuff. So if
Right.
one of these is a 5-page reference letter, they're probably not even going to, they're going to want to quit in the first paragraph. But if it's one page, I know they're going to commit to the one page. So I got the page. Well, she went in there and I got this great thank you note. She says, I went through the interview and they said, okay, we had to interview because it's part of the process and everything. But to be honest with you, you were hired as soon as we've read this reference from this guy named Boron.
Amazing.
And cool. I was like, I was so proud of it. I was like, yeah, but But the whole point is, I mean, I understood because I've hired people, and this is the problem. You wonder, are they reliable? Do they show up on time? Are they trustworthy? Are they a team player? Are they, do they get along with their fellow coworkers? Can they handle and work independently? And just take care of tasks when given the goal. So I made sure that, she was able to we just handle projects, and we can handle the whole thing off to her. And if it was something for which she was going to be a member of a team, she did it, and, did it with, she was happily a member of the team and all this other stuff. Oh, you're probably wondering, I'm thinking, and, your objection is, well, if she's so great, why didn't you hire her? I handled that objection, all that other stuff. But it all started with where we talked about earlier, making them to decide to read it. That was part of my dad's editing process. Create enough eye relief so when people look at it, they go, okay, I'm going to try reading this. These are some short paragraphs, and there's some subheads and stuff like that. Let me take a look at this and see if I'm going to do it. So all of that went into just a letter of reference. And, and it turned out to be, what they needed to hear in order to buy, and this is what they needed to hear in order to hire, and it's so applicable. And that's the other thing that, my dad was a fantastic persuader all around, in person for getting people to do all kinds of stuff. In fact, I asked my mom, why'd you go out with dad? She goes, it was amazing. He could persuade anybody to do almost anything. And he was doing the world's most widely mailed sales letter in history, which was a coat of arms promotion. And I won't go into the long story, but he generated a fake computer letter. Before the computer letters, it was obvious that when they said, "Dear Matthew," Matthew was kind of like a different kind of font. This is when the technology sucked. And so, what he would do is he would sell, your last name's Volkwin. I'm just trying to get it pronounced properly.
Yeah,
So,
Volkwin.
okay, so he would say, "Dear Mr. Fulton," and so what would happen is he would sell it. He would send it out to 100 different people, or 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, and they all like, okay, he's directing this to me, because back then the technology was so it was a fake computer personalized letter. Anyway, but the solution to mailing that, he got some great results, and he gets some bad results on mailings. And my mom was the one who came up with the solution for that. She goes, "Well, you bonehead, if your name is Miller, your name's not that common, so that people don't want to buy a coat of arms. But if your name's Halbert, it's a little bit more unique, and you want to buy the coat of arms. It's, for multiple reasons, talking, conversation piece, a little bit of pride, stuff like that." Anyway, so he goes, that makes sense. So he would order the lists, and they were all done in, he would order them, and he would just mail all the Halberts. Well, somewhere, this was R.R. Donnelly, and they were, I think, in Washington at the time, D.C. And the problem was they had just switched over to a newfangled system, and they were reordering the list in zip code order. And my dad couldn't use that. My dad needed them sorted in, because this is in the 1970s. And so he needed them to do it in, put them back in name order for him, at least for him. And, and so my dad said, "I'm going to go fix this." He hopped on a plane. My mom said, "I don't know how he did it, but he came back, and it was in name order again, everything that they needed." And he's going to tell these people, "No, I need you to sort this way, and I need it done this way. And if you do so, this is, we're a big mailing house. We're going to be renting these names. It's going to mean a lot of money to you." He knew what they needed to hear in order to give him what he wanted.
So he sold them on it too. Yeah.
Yeah. So he learned, so I always say you learn persuasion techniques from your parents for the most part until you get a good mentor. So if somebody screams and yells to get what they want, or threatens to get what they want, that's what you learn to do. Well, I learned a myriad of techniques from a guy who's figuring out this is what they care about and so forth. And so, it was definitely a very unique upbringing. I will say that. But, yeah, no, it's, good copy is, understanding, what people need to hear in order to buy, figuring that out. And it's not about creative words, and, I mean, when you buy something or something attracted you, it was because they made a light bulb go off in your head and think about something in a different way. It is because something, oh, that makes sense. You're never like, because I was so impressed with his vocabulary.
That's good. Yeah, I like it a lot. I think that more copywriters need to spend time, with the fundamentals. I think a lot of the copywriters these days that are coming into the industry, they're learning the structures, that templatized sort of structures. There's a lot of swipe. There's a lot about how to prompt AI. A lot of these sort of, it was like you were talking about earlier, all the writers that were competing against your father, right? They were all coming with the tacticals and the structures and the Lego blocks of writing. And he just knew exactly what that prospect needed in order to buy. That's where I think more copywriters need to spend their time. I mean, that's what I definitely am going to start doing more of as well. So when you talk about systems, you mentioned the word systems quite a few times. The way that you see, the process, there's a lot of systems behind it, not just like a swipe or not just a tactic. It's a system. What does that look like? Because for me, I've also spent the last few years building it out as a system, because I find that when you have too much of a script word for word, it kind of, you can't actually apply it in different contexts. So I've also been using the word system. So what do you mean when you know your process? Is it very systematic?
The problem is it's yes and no. So I want to step back to one thing you said just 1 second ago, which was teaching copywriting. So my father, what he would do, which is what I do with my son. My son wanted me to teach him marketing. So I'm doing Boron 2.0. And I'm going to ask you a favor right here in front of everybody in the world, which is I'd find somebody who's really good at what they do. And at their area, I would say, would you give him a training on that area? Right. So I'm not only training him, I'm getting the best people in the world to, give him a little training. So would you give him a little training, in a video?
I'd be honored to. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I teach him, when I was learning, my dad didn't start with what's a headline and everything. He would turn around and go, okay, this is this person. I'm going in to do this. What do you think they care about the most? And then I would sit there and say, well, this is what they probably care about right now. This is the big concern. This is their worry. It was studying people. That was one thing. So that's part of the system, even though it's not a systematic thing. But some stuff was system, but you have to understand when it's not needed and when to pull it. So I'll give you one that I do. I've been teaching lately, and because I don't think so. I give a much more example training on this, which punches everything up. Bullets are mini headlines, right? It's feature and benefit, right? But then there's the feature, the benefit, and then you can either say the benefit of the benefit, or you keep saying, so what? Okay, so you say this watch comes with a high density, stainless steel bracelet. Okay, that's the feature. The benefit of the stainless steel bracelet is so that it won't scratch, right? Okay, and so, what's the benefit of it not scratching? Okay, holds its resale value longer, right? Looks good 20 years later. Okay, so feature, benefit of benefit, and that's usually where a lot of people stop. I say, what's the emotional benefit there, right? The pride the pride you have when it looks so good that your son is so happy to wear it when he inherits the watch, right? Or he knows it's still looking good. And then sometimes there's a benefit of an emotional benefit. So I didn't use that one in that example. The example I'll give you now is it's a self-defense course. And I'm going to give you 5 judo techniques that show you how to, that's the feature. The benefit of it is it's going to show you how to take down opponents twice your size. Okay?
Okay.
That's the benefit of that. The emotional benefit of that is confidence and lack of fear. Right? The benefit of that emotional benefit is what can you do when you don't have a lot of fear about some other things? Well, when I'm traveling around in the country, I'm not afraid that I might take a turn down an alley, right? Because, that might be the wrong alley.
That's good.
You might, I might be at a bar and I see somebody I want to hit on, but I don't know if, she's waiting for a date that's going to come in and get mad at me, or she might actually be married and I'm worried that her husband's going to pop in and kick my butt or whatever, right? So the point is, when I do this, there's a benefit, a feature that's always one, but there can be multiple benefits of that feature. Okay. And then there can be multiple benefits of these benefits. And then there can be multiple emotional benefits, and there could be multiple benefits of the emotional benefit. Okay.
Layers. I love it. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is, then what I do is I string together the most powerful of these, because what are people buying on? Emotion. Right. And so, the difference is by the way, the other thing is, you have to give people their thoughts. You can't, if you turn around, that's another very key fundamental of marketing, is you give them their thoughts. You can't assume that they're going to naturally come to the conclusion that this watch is going to hold its resale value longer because it's got a stainless steel bracelet and will look good. You have to tell them it'll be harder to scratch. Now, here's some more benefits of that, by the way. Okay, so you got to remember, there's lots of benefits, and you can string them together. With the stainless steel bracelet, it's, you can shower with it, and so you don't leave it on the counter in the gym where it gets stolen, right? Okay. So, and so what you can do is say, with the stainless steel, it doesn't scratch easy, which means it'll last longer, hold its benefit longer, and you don't have to take, you're less likely to lose it because you took it off when you were swimming or going into the gym. And so, and then, and it'll be something that, will still look good when your son inherits this, this timepiece, and,
You weaved it all together all the way through.
And you can weave it together all the way through, and then you can do all the other things. You can put in numbers, right? And say, on average, these things are, it's got a hardness rating of 8, so which means only a diamond would scratch it, whatever. You can put in proof elements in there. You can put in numbers. You can punch it up and stuff like that. So you're writing long, and then you're hacking down to what you really would be painful not to put in there. Okay. But so that's a system. Okay. But is that a template that you're going to steal from another watch ad? No. Okay.
Yeah, you could use it for anything.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like anything else that other people are saying. And, so that's what I believe in about systems. So when it comes down to stories, when it comes down to headlines, it comes down to bullets, it comes down to that, the PS kind of sounds like a template, but the truth is, you don't have to just, that's what you use in an emergency. But you just realize that, you're kicking people off the fence with the PS and inspiring them to realize that they might miss out if they don't read this and see if this opportunity is right for them. Everybody is reading it. Everybody pays attention until the moment, and this is important for your editing, they are looking for the spot to say, oh, I can read this and I'm not going to miss out on anything that I would care about. That's when they stop reading, right? They stop reading at that point. So you don't give them that point. At the point that you think you might be giving them that point, that's when you set in another anchor or you talk about something else. Open up another loop that they're going to be wanting to be interested in, but make it about them, because opening up a loop about the story of, me boating with my dad is not nearly as important as the story about me boating with my dad that led to a $1.7 million marketing breakthrough. That might be a benefit to you.
Yeah. Okay? Right.
So, so I believe in systems, but I don't believe in making them so rigid that everything sounds the same. So you could take that formula that I gave you for writing I call it a bullet matrix, and you could go into that, and then, your bullets are not all going to sound exactly the same. And some of them are going to have, 20 benefits. Some of them are going to have 1 benefit. Some will have an emotional benefit. Some won't, and stuff like that. But what's going to end up, and you can reorder and reword it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a system. And and you should have, I have systems for the majority of all the components of any kind of piece. And then again, going back to the fundamentals and what you need to hear in order to buy, you figure out, I don't need this from this person, or for this price point, I don't need risk reversal, or, there's a great closing argument that my dad gave me one time and was explaining, and I don't think I've ever heard him say it or detail it. It's the what if I'm right, what if I'm wrong closing argument.
Okay,
Now,
I'm excited.
so
Yeah.
if I turn around and I say, hey, you know what? I want you to join my group. It's only X amount of dollars per month. And it's going to teach you how to, write copy that beats everybody else's and everything. And so, but, I want you to think about it this way. What if I'm wrong? What if what everybody says about Bond Halbert, that I've paid them all, and you get ludicrous with this. I lied to all of them, right? I paid them to say these nice things, and, I bribed, I bribed them to say these nice things. None of them are true. I have, I spent, 47 years in the industry. I didn't learn anything new. My dad bragging about how I was a really smart and wise and sharp person. He's just, he didn't really think of me as any smarter than the family dog and all of this other stuff. And it's totally all BS. In fact, I'm a terrible person. I might even take all your money and run off to South America and blow all of it, doing drugs and, and, sipping Mai Tais on a beach and laughing the whole way. In that worst case scenario, what you're going to do is, you are out a whopping, whatever, the price of less than the price of dinner at a fancy restaurant in any town in America. Right. But what if I'm right? What if what I teach you, shows you how to increase your results by even just 2% on everything you're going to write for the rest of your career, right? And adding all of that up, how much that is worth to you, and I'm promising so forth, at that, when you think about it that way, you can't afford not to give this a shot. Okay. Now, do I need to go through all of that to sell you a $17 book? No. But do I need to go through all that? And, and so, here's an example of when you do and when you don't. Some people's programs and offers are different. Ours is like, there's no monthly minimum, right? So that doesn't mean that you're not locked into buying it for a whole year. Other people's, it's 12 months, but you buy 10 months at a time. You pay for it for 10 months all up front, and then, you have to renew. So that one, you might want to use that argument, right? What if you say, what if all these people, that, all these testimonials I got are fake. In fact, and get ludicrous. In fact, the images are probably that, imagine they could be made by AI, and, Jane and John and Michael and Xavier, they don't really even exist. Right. And I wrote the testimonials myself, and, and I have no ability to help you and all that, and I even forged the checks that you see in my pictures and all of this other stuff.
Yeah, those are somebody else's Stripe bank balances. And
yeah. And I did what everybody else is doing. These were all test payments that I put through myself and stuff like this. And it was all fake, but what if I'm right? What if what I teach you changes and gives you that, the ability to choose your clients from, and gives you a steady stream, makes you so good that you are on the fast track to being the top in the top writer in the industry. What if what I teach you, does all this, and you explain and gives them the benefit that they are dreaming of having from the end of it, And so it was, it's a great kind of, closing argument, but it's a system. So, and so what I might say that sounds ludicrous in one thing it'll still be say something that sounds ludicrous it's a system and a kind of a formula, but it doesn't sound the same as every time, because when there's an old joke, but wait, wait, here there's more, for the old
Yeah.
infomercials and everything. And I
Hmm.
always wanted to create the infomercial, and what I wanted to sell was common sense. Does every time you put in plates into the cupboard, do they all fall out and crash? Every time that you try and flip an egg, you actually flip it onto the stove, and stuff like that. Well, with common sense, you won't have to do this ever again. You'll be able to turn the tap off when it's done filling the water bottle. because all of those infomercials basically show people lacking common sense, right?
They do the most stupid things. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I used that, but wait, there's more in a recent sales letter. Like I put the GIF, I put a little like image of it right at the section where I wanted to sell my bonuses. I was like, but wait, there's more. And
But that's using humor, right? That's different from actually sounding like everybody else. And by the way, you can go, if you go far enough, that's a better template to use. If you go back to where, if you go back to like the rich jerk formula now, it's not that, there's a whole generation of people who've never heard of it.
going back, pulling it.
Oh, I love picking up, magazines that have direct response ads in them that are from like the 1960s. Everybody, the majority of people who are buying those, they're retired and no longer doing those things. And so it doesn't, they inspire and give you ideas. They're still fantastic and stuff like that. But that's what I mean by systems, is the example of these kind of ways of thinking and going about it, but cutting out this part you don't need, adding and punching up this other part and stuff like that. But so the system is, think about the benefit, think about the multiple benefits that, or the features, the multiple benefits from that, the multiple benefits of those benefits. When you run out of benefits, what are the emotional benefits of that? And then what are the benefits of those emotional benefits? And then stringing together what's the most powerful thing. And so that's what I believe, that's my idea of a system for writing. But the one thing I don't find is like, there's, for example, there's the hero's journey, right? We've all heard that a million times. Well, sometimes you don't really have a hero's journey and you're just kind of, you're making it up. And by the way, it's not there. So, everybody's got the, I was sleeping in my car story, and then I was, and so people, when it comes to me, I don't have that, well, how'd you fall into copywriting, Bond? Or, how did you learn how to do direct response marketing? Oh, just do what I did. Go be born somebody else's kid. I can't say that, right? So I don't have that story. It doesn't fit with me. Right. So I have to go and use something different. So you learn all these things and then you say, this element's useful in this offer, with these, and I call them assets is what I call them. So, it's an asset if you're, let's suppose you're teaching copywriting, it's an asset if you can turn around and say, I failed high school English, because one of the things is it always takes, you want to sell them in a way where they're like, the reason for that hero's journey starting off with you are terrible at something is because of two things. I was terrible at that too. So I was terrible at English, and if you can become a copywriter, I can, it gives me inspiration and hope. The other one is I was great at high school English, and if you can make money doing it, I should probably be even better. Right. So that's the psychology behind that. And, and you take them you always want to go from a place that's worse than they were, or the exact place that they are, that's terrible, to a place that's better than they dare dreamed.
That's the principle. I see. Yeah.
That's an old school principle, and you still want to use the modern one. You say, I was, so when they say, I was struggling to learn, marketing, and I was, I went to go learn marketing, and I tried a couple of copywriting instructors, and Matthew's the one that actually made it click for me. And I'm so glad that I went through his course, and I've gotten a few clients, and I'm happy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about turning around and say, my friends were all laughing at me when I said I wanted to be a copywriter. My wife was saying that if I didn't get a real job soon, she might leave me. My my bills were piling up. I had paid, I had borrowed money from my in-laws to take to hire a mentor, and things weren't working out and everything. And that's when I discovered this one, the Gary Halbert letter, and everything started to click. And when I did it and I started understanding it and I tried it, and then, took these, or I went with Matthew and I started learning about, how, systems for getting new copy clients. And now I have more clients than I could possibly handle. In fact, I am referring the clients that I can handle to other copywriters I know, and they're even offering me referral fees for it. So I not only get
there's the emotional benefit. There's the benefit behind the emotional.
Yeah.
They're paying the copywriters that were laughing at me are not paying me for referrals.
Yeah, and so
like
so
it.
what happens is, you
Yeah.
were taking it to a place where better than they dare dreamed, because you got some people who are hoping to get their first copywriting client, and now
That
they're
is deep. Yeah.
now they're just flooded with it.
I love that. It's like it's so subtle to say that the copywriters are now paying me referral fees, but like just adding that like they're paying you as well. That's fantastic. That's so smart. Yeah.
Bringing this back around, let's imagine we're putting these talking points into AI. And I say, I want you to write a story, and it starts about a copywriter who who is, staying up at night because he or she has been invested all of the money that they borrowed from their in-laws to, in a mentorship to become a copywriting course, and, did all this, and then discovered this course and discovered this and that. And this is now where they are. And they're, they've got, more clients than they can handle. Every Monday morning, they set an hour, and there's 15 people trying to get into that appointment so that they can possibly hire this copywriter. And then
start charging for the appointments.
Yeah. And then you start charging for the referrals and everything. And you put all of these points into AI versus, hey, I want you to go in the style of Gary Halbert, and I want you to write me a sales letter that says that I'm a good copywriting coach, and if you do this, you're probably going to make some good money. Those talking points are what AI will pull out will blow away what everybody else is doing when they're all using the same standard 50 prompts or 100 prompts that that they're getting from an AI coach. So
they bought it for $17 too.
Yes. So unique ideas like that, right? Unique talking points. Again, unique editing, being, better at that, and unique storytelling. You can still use AI to speed up the process and use it as a fantastic tool. But if you want to be good, you're going to have to be better at one of those elements we talked about earlier.
That's just so good. I love it. I've got so many notes today. It's fantastic. This is a copywriting masterclass. The people use that word and they say it's a masterclass. This is the masterclass on copywriting for 2025 and 2026.
Well, that means a lot.
Fantastic.
I know that you.
I really like it.
No, it's a masterclass for 2026. Okay, we're at the end of.
Let me say it again for the intro. We're going to add it to the intro afterwards. Okay, so
yeah, no problem.
Wow. Let me say it. So we add it as the editor. We're going to put it in the beginning of the video.
Okay.
Wow. Wait, I actually can't take it seriously now. Hang on. This might be actually what you've said today might actually be the masterclass for copywriters in 2026. This is fantastic stuff. Okay, there we go.
Hey, well,
but it's true. It's true. I genuinely feel that way. I love this. This is so good.
Oh, I believe it. I mean, but look, it's my job to show that, I always say, having the last name Halbert gets your foot in the door. Being a Halbert is what gets you, people begging you to come back. But I know that you have interviewed some world-class copywriters. So I'm, hearing you say that means a lot to me.
Yeah, I mean it. Where can people find you if they want to learn your secrets, learn your systems, get your perspective over all these years of being in this industry?
Well, I'm on socials, and I'm not in competition with the other Bond Halbert, because there is no other Bond Halbert. So you can follow me on the socials. But I do have a website, bondhalbert.com. Right now, it's the tech is a little wonky. I think the site might be down because of it looks different on different browsers for some reason. But, sign up at bondhalbert.com and you'll hear more about me. And, I'll be sending out more, chances and opportunities to work and learn and stuff like that from me, if you're interested in it. And we also, I still, I co-own the GaryHalbertLetter.com, and with my brother.
Is that GaryHalbertLetter.com or the Gary Halbert Letter?
It's the GaryHalbertLetter.com. He was very specific about wanting the in there. And we also own Halbertizing, with an S. And Halbertizing is a group where what we're trying to do is take copywriters who have studied courses and are learning stuff and write and take them from the, making it all click for them by looking at their copy, going over their copy and stuff like that. And then also, helping them understand about getting jobs and, how it's different, and it's because I feel like a lot of people are doing things in the wrong way. I see them in online groups and it feels like, 5,000 fishermen, with in a pond, and there's the fish down there's the business owner, and there's one of them, right?
Yeah.
And, it's like, okay, wait a minute, wouldn't it be better to be one fisherman in a pond filled with, business owners and stuff like that. So, hit me up in any of those things if you want.
Cool. We'll put the links in the description. That's fantastic. And I've purchased a course from Clayton that's that's hosted at halbertizing.com, and I got to say it's definitely some of the best material I've gone through. So, from what I've so far gone through, that's on halbertizing.com. It's fantastic.
He's actually really fantastic. What? There's one thing I wanted to say and it's not one of the expensive things. When we talked about handwriting out ads and stuff like that, there is one thing that makes it even more valuable. I wish I was the one who thought of this. We had somebody purchase one of our breakdowns of our father's ads, and what we do is we go through it like we say, this is the market, this is where the leads came from, this is what the overall goal is, and we go through explaining why this line is written the way that it is and why this word was chosen over a different word. And we say, this is where he's going into this part of the copy. And the student was so sharp. They listened to that when they hand copy the ad. So they not only are reading it, writing it, they knowing why they're writing these words. That was like, that's really
smart. Yeah.
smart.
I like that.
So there are ad breakdowns on there as well, which are extremely valuable just to understand the ad breakdown. But if you're willing to give the handwriting exercise a shot, that is a great way to supercharge it.
Thank you so much for today's conversation. It was really insightful. I learned a lot, and I hope everyone watching, you guys gain some value from this as well, and that you go and learn more from Bond. So yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Cool. We'll have to have a chat again sometime soon. Maybe we'll talk about the secrets to how to be fishing in that big pond, or maybe we'll talk about something else. I'm curious to know. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Any aspect of direct response marketing you want to dive into with me, where I think the future is going, the changes that will be on the horizon, how to get clients, anything like that, I'm always willing to do it.
Put in the comments. What are your questions? Put in the comments, and maybe we'll bring Bond back for a conversation about some good questions. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'd be honored.
Yeah, it was great.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, nice chatting with you today. I'll see you soon.
Nice chatting with you.
Thanks.